Welcome to Mr. Hutchings History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
Welcome to our deep dive, and today we're tackling the Nation of Islam. You're interested in the Elijah Muhammad era, right? How to become so powerful, especially during the civil rights and black power movements. I mean, figures like Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali, their involvement definitely put the NOI on the map. But to really get it, we got to go back to the start.
Absolutely, to the 1930s Detroit. A bit mysterious, actually. This guy, Wallace Muhammad, pops up with these unique religious teachings. Black people, the original Earth people, he said, got to separate from white society. Then, poof, he's gone in 1934. No trace. Divine messenger, ascended, met a, let's say, less spiritual end, who knows? But it adds to the whole NOI mystique for sure.
Like a detective novel, almost. So, Fard vanishes. Who takes the lead?
Elijah Muhammad, born Elisha Poole, 1897, Georgia, smack dab in the South during some serious racial oppression. You can see how that shaped his NOI vision. Black empowerment, self-sufficiency, ditching the status quo, the whole deal.
And here's where things get interesting. He's not about integration like a lot of the civil rights movement folks. Elijah Muhammad's talking about something way more radical. A black nation within a nation.
Exactly. Black nationalism, that was the core. A separate black economy, institutions, everything. Completely separate from the systems that had been oppressing black people for centuries.
Total contrast to, like, Martin Luther King, Junior King's pushing for integration, a unified society. Elijah Muhammad saying, nope, we build our own separate over here.
Right. And for many black Americans disillusioned with how slow change was happening, this resonated.
It was bold, for sure. But they didn't just talk. The NOI under Elijah Muhammad, they put these ideas into action.
They did. Farms, businesses, restaurants, even a bank, showing that black people could not only survive, but thrive on their own. A successful bakery in Chicago, for example, jobs, economic independence.
Now, here's where the controversy kicks in. The NOI, they had some religious teachings that raised eyebrows. White people, a race of devils created by this scientist, Yaqub. Sounds extreme to some, but got to remember the historical context.
Absolutely. Widespread discrimination, segregation, violence against black people, it was everywhere.
This teaching, for many, it was like this powerful rejection of white supremacy, reclaiming their history, finding pride in a society that constantly devalued them.
Gave them a sense of power, a reason for their separatist stance.
Flipping the script, challenging the narrative. But it also drew criticism, even within the black community. Now, we got to talk about Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali. How did they shape the NOI?
Great question. Malcolm X, he joins in the 40s while in prison, drawn to the message of empowerment, self-reliance, all that. And man, could he speak. Quickly becomes a leading voice, spreading the NOI message across the nation.
Total charisma. And he didn't shy away from speaking truth to power. Freedom by any means necessary, his famous quote, that captures the NOI's attitude perfectly.
Symbol of black pride, resistance, electrifying speeches. He spoke to the anger, the frustration, but also offered hope, a better future built on self-determination and unity.
Then you've got Muhammad Ali, converts to the NOI in '64, right after becoming world heavyweight champion. Talk about a spotlight on the organization.
Huge turning point, especially for young black Americans. This global icon, embracing the NOI, validation, legitimacy, showed the NOI was a force to be reckoned with.
And his decision to join. So brave, given the times. And then refusing to be drafted during Vietnam. Religious and moral grounds, he said. Cost him his title, almost landed him in prison.
Sent shockwaves across the country.
Showed he was a man of principle, willing to sacrifice everything for what he believed in.
Actions rooted in faith, commitment to social justice that resonated deeply.
Especially within the black community, many saw the war as unjust. Both Malcolm X and Ali, symbols of the fight for black liberation.
Each in their own way, for sure.
Power of conviction, using your platform to fight injustice.
They took the NOI message global, made it part of a bigger conversation about race, power, equality.
Challenged the world to see black people as agents of their own destiny, not victims.
Powerful stuff. But the NOI was more than just its famous figures. It's important to remember that.
Right, a complex organization with a layered history. And its impact went way beyond religion and boxing.
The NOI and their focus on self-sufficiency, racial pride, really resonated with the Black Power movement in the 60s. Groups like the Black Panthers, advocating for power within black communities, right? You could argue Elijah Muhammad's teachings laid the groundwork.
That's a really interesting link. Shows how their ideas went beyond just the NOI, influenced a whole generation of activists.
Exactly. Historian Manning Marable. He argues that the NOI's ideology, black autonomy, self-determination, it was like a blueprint for the Black Power movement's demands, Community control, economic justice.
Elijah Muhammad, he was a visionary leader. In a
Yeah.
lot of ways, despite the controversies.
Oh, for sure. But even as the NOI gained traction, cracks started to show. Not everyone agreed with the whole separatist thing, and internal conflicts started brewing.
The tension between Elijah Muhammad's philosophy and integrationists like Martin Luther King Jr.
Exactly. Fundamental disagreement about the path to equality. King, a unified society, black and white people coexisting. Elijah Muhammad, separation, the only way to true liberation.
And this clash played out big time in Malcolm X's life. He leaves the NOI, right?
Yeah. 1964, a pivotal moment. He learns about some of Elijah Muhammad's personal scandals. His own understanding of Islam evolves. He starts questioning the NOI's direction, starts advocating for working with other civil rights leaders, a more inclusive vision of Islam.
From separatism to a more universal approach, a huge shift from his earlier stance, and then tragically assassinated just a year after leaving.
Devastating loss for the black community, highlighted the danger and complexity of the fight for racial justice.
Absolutely. Before we get to Elijah Muhammad's lasting impact and how the NOI evolved, let's step back, look at the different historical perspectives on the organization.
Okay, so historians have approached the NOI from all angles, different interpretations of its role and importance. Some emphasize its contribution to black pride and resistance. Others say the separatist stance limited their ability to achieve broader social change.
It's fascinating how historians have grappled with these complexities.
Yeah, like religious historians. They highlight how the NOI created a distinct African-American Islamic identity, challenging Christianity's dominance in black communities. Social historians. They look at how the NOI's self-reliance message resonated with people facing poverty and discrimination.
Decades later, the NOI still sparks debate and inspires scholarship, a testament to its multifaceted nature. What about Elijah Muhammad's lasting influence then? What happened after he died in 75?
Big turning point for the NOI. His son, Wallace Muhammad, took over, steered the organization in a whole new direction.
Embracing traditional Sunni Islam, moving away from the more racially charged teachings.
Exactly. Wallace Muhammad, he advocated for racial inclusivity, integrating the NOI into the wider Muslim world. But this shift, not everyone was on board. 1978, Louis Farrakhan revised Elijah Muhammad's original teachings, keeps the separatist stance, emphasizes black empowerment.
So the NOI splits into two, each claiming to be the true successor to Elijah Muhammad's legacy.
Right. And both groups are still active today, shows the power and complexity of Elijah Muhammad's vision. Despite the internal divisions, the shifts in ideology, the NOI's impact on the fight for racial justice in America, unmistakable.
A story of resilience, adaptation, the ongoing struggle for equality. But here's the key takeaway. The NOI under Elijah Muhammad, it wasn't just a religious group. It was a social and political force, challenging the status quo, demanding recognition and empowerment for black people.
Absolutely. They forced America to confront its racism, push the conversation on race and equality further than many wanted, agree with their methods or not. The NOI was a key player in shaping black activism and thought.
A blueprint for black self-reliance and pride. Still resonates today. Wrapping up our deep dive into Elijah Muhammad's Nation of Islam. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's striking how much of what we discussed, it's still relevant today. Race, identity, social justice, those themes are still so alive.
The struggle for economic empowerment. Figuring out racial identity in America. Finding a place in a society that feels so divided. It's all there in the NOI's story. Makes you wonder, what if things had gone differently?
Interesting.
Like, what if Malcolm X hadn't been assassinated? Could his vision for a more inclusive movement have taken hold?
It's tough to say. Hypotheticals are tricky. But one thing's for sure. The NOI controversies and all, it really shaped how America talked about race.
They challenged white supremacy head-on, offered a radical alternative for black empowerment, forced America to look in the mirror, sparked a national conversation about racial justice.
They weren't afraid to push the boundaries.
Their legacy shows the power of ideas, the constant fight for equality.
And it reminds us that struggle for social justice is rarely simple.
Yeah. Messy, complex.
Internal disagreements, changing
Mhm.
perspectives.
A journey, not a destination.
Exactly.
And that's why we keep digging into this history. To learn from it, apply those lessons to today's challenges.
Absolutely. The NOI story, the good and the bad, it offers valuable lessons in the fight for racial justice. Self-reliance, collective action, vigilance in the face of injustice. It's all there.
We hope this deep dive gave you a better understanding. The Nation of Islam under Elijah Muhammad, their impact on the civil rights and black power movements, and their lasting legacy.
Definitely. Keep exploring this history, dive into the sources, form your own conclusions. History isn't just about the past, it's about understanding how we got here and making better choices for the future.
Thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon with another fascinating deep dive at
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.